The River Tyne has over 60 miles of waterway, stretching from Warden Rock near Hexham to the North Sea. All along the Tyne, numerous industries have flourished for many generations. From shipbuilding and paint production to the fish quay, the river has been the centre of industrial activity for all of Tyneside. The people of North and South Tyneside have lived and worked within a stone's throw of the big river and the industries that ran along its banks.
What's past is past, that's what they say. You can't go back to yesterday. The trouble is, the more I live, the more I see. And believe me, ghosts on the time, they're all the time. Ghosts on the time. Looking at tomorrow with a foot in yesterday, not looking back in sorrow, just letting the past have its say. Oh, ghosts on the time, they're all the time. Ghosts on the time.
Shipbuilding dominated the Tyne for almost 150 years, with thousands of ships being built in great shipyards. Palmers, Leslies, Redheads, Smith's Docks, Swans, names which have stayed in the hearts and minds of generations of Tynesiders.
I couldn't believe going in the yard, the amount of people that was there, the crowds. It's like a football match going down the bank. It was just massive. Everything was huge, everything was big, strange.
I was able to start work straight away, which is at Swan Hunters, as a tool store boy. Very exciting time.
In those days you didn't have a proper formal interview like you have now. We just saw the gaffer, and a few months later I was able to start serving my time as a blacksmith, which was a 5-year apprenticeship based in the blacksmith shop over in Swan Hunters in Wallsend. It was like Hell's Kitchen at the time. I mean, straight out of school, you know, just a year earlier and going to somewhere like that. It was just cacophony and noise. It was horrendous, like. But you didn't think anything of it at the time, like.
By the time I became 16 to become an apprentice, I had really learned an awful lot about the shipyard itself. Not least where all the different departments were and what was done in different parts of the yard. You had to go and find these guys, give them their plans, and often you'd be crawling around the ship trying to find them. But I used to just run around, and quite frankly, it seemed an awful lot of work at the time.
Well, the passion was the river and the ships, you know. I mean, ships are like beautiful girls. It's a passion watching them being built from, you know, a couple of plates, and seeing the shapes of them, they're fantastic. They're really incredible.
Working together created a strong sense of community. Young men worked with their fathers and uncles. If they stepped out of line, there was someone on hand to remind them they had to behave. They lived side by side in homes near the river, drank and socialised together.
60 by the dock gates, there's overtime all week. No time to eat your bits and too tired to speak. Mauritania takes the blue ribbon. Ark Royal at Swans, she leaves with a brass band. Men of the Tyne, feel a sweat and blood. Men of the Tyne, I stand where you stood. Pride swells inside. Men of the Tyne.
A lot of the tugs and a lot of the lads and family, they were sons of tugboatmen, grandsons of tugboatmen. They're just like all histories of tugboatmen.
I started on the Fisky really probably by accident. I think there was about 5 generations. Only one was my father, which was a wholesaler, and then myself. But prior to that, my grandfather was a fisherman. His father before him, and 2 generations before that. The first job I had was just swan hunters working in a shipyard. Just started to serve me time as a shipwright, and unfortunately I took ill, and because of the illness I had to give the yard up.
Well, most of my family have been associated with the river in some form or other. If it wasn't being a ship builder, it was then being a ship owner or working on a tug or something like that. So I always wanted to be attached to the river in some form.
One of the things about the fish quay was you were always threatened as a kid, you know, if you didn't stick in at school and, you know, work hard at school, you would end up on that fish quay, or the express was usually that bloody fish quay. But the thing was that I really always wanted to work down here.
In this local area, if you didn't go down the pits, you went to sea, you know, you were either a seaman or a pitman. Or we could serve the time on the Tyne. When I left school, a friend of mine started on the tug called the Annick, and I went aboard one day with him, and I was so impressed with it, you know. Put my name down for a job, but they said, oh, you've got no chance of a job on the tugs, it's a family business. So I went back and pestered them, and just got sick of the sight of us. Till I eventually got a relieving job on a sister tug called the Ashbrook. I loved the job, loved the river. She was a great tug and great crew. And there was some great people worked on the river in them days, you know.
My experience in going down the yard and meeting all the different trades, I had nothing but the highest regard for the guys and the men in the yard that did the jobs. They always managed to, they always met their deadline.
Men of the Tyne, tribute to your skill. Men of the Tyne, time can't stand still, you're left on the tide. Men of the Tyne, you can hear them say, the tide's hard as day. So landscape the past and it'll go away. Make it go away. Make sure it dies away. Make sure it dies away. Kelly at Leslie, Mitchison's for tugs. At middle docks, the naval yard for subs. 6 deep at the Neptune, pints appear like dreams. Jukebox plays an old tune, our poor hearts bleed. Men of the Tyne, feel a sweat and blood. Men of the Tyne, I stand where you stood. Pride swells inside.
With the shipyards being the major industry along the Tyne, and with most of the surrounding industries supplying goods or services for the manufacture and repair of ships, everyone expected and assumed things would never change. But change it did. In the early 80s, the future of the shipyards and shipbuilding on the Tyne would be cast into doubt with devastating effect. By 1986, there was no shipbuilding on the south side of the river. The closure of the shipyards was painful to the community on the Tyne. Slowly but surely, great yards were closed. Shipbuilding moved to Korea, Sweden, and later to India and China. It It was obvious that this decline of the yards would have a terrible impact on the area. The Jarrow Member of Parliament, Peter Dixon, during a speech in the House of Commons in 1983 said, "There was little investment in British shipbuilding compared to our overseas competitors," and went on to say, rather pathetically, "If we are not careful, we shall have no one to build ships in the future."
These shipyards didn't just fade away and sink under the water. They were politically destroyed, basically, you know, because they didn't get the support that they should have. Americans could still build the ships as good as anyone, but they didn't get the support from government that they should have got. You know, unfortunately, the government at the time they never bothered about the northeast anyway, because they don't get many votes up this way. But it's sad to see the situation now. But there was a hard-fought battle by the trade unions and the community and everybody concerned.
Redundancy meant a golden handshake with months and too often years of unemployment. For many it meant working out of the area and leaving Tyneside, sometimes for good.
Oh yes, totally destroyed. The annoying part of it is there are still as many ships being built in the world as what there was 30, 40, 50 years ago. Obviously things change. We didn't have the space on the River Tyne, being so narrow. The modern shipyards are built in Korea and Japan. They're built in great big bays where they have access to the open sea. No problem. But the annoying part here is that the engineering works went with it as well, because we had some fantastic engineering works.
The experience you got through being in a smaller drawing house than a bigger one was that it turned out that one of the immediate apprentices above me, more senior to me, became managing director of the Caterpillar Tractor Company. The other one became the chief design guy for Albee Froddingham, the steel firm. Another one became the head naval architect for South Shields Marine School. Another one became a representative for British Corporation, which was like the Lloyds in those days. They all did very well. Personally, I joined, when I got to McGregor's, I became the chief draftsman. And then when I left McGregor's and eventually ended up at Austin and Pickersgirls, I was chief estimator on the hull side. So the experience we'd picked up at Redheads must have been good, I think. You can't have everybody going out and taking on that kind of job if they're no good at it, you know.
But you were in and out, you know, you were signing on the door and then you go back into there for a week and say this is no good, like, so I decided to change course. I went into full-time education then. I did a degree and I ended up being a mental health social worker, which I did for 20 years and just retired last year. So, but that's the way I dealt with it, you know. I mean, some people weren't as fortunate about that, you know. I mean, a lot of the people I work with, they're still out of work, you know, and they never worked since.
I retired when I was 60. I took early retirement, and because the shipyards were going to be closed anyway, so I took the lesser of two evils and retired early.
It was said to me in 1969 or thereabouts by one of the old hands. He says they might as well put gates on the piers for what's going to come in this river.
It wasn't just the shipyards that declined during this period. The other high employers such as mining and fishing would also contribute to the growing unemployment.
It's sad. I mean, we are the ones that contributed to it through overfishing, through not paying a big enough price for fish, making people fish when really they shouldn't. So really it's up to us to give a fair price for fish, as they do in France and as they do in other countries, because the fishermen deserve it. And of course we now have different schemes in place to preserve the fishing, with having areas that you can't fish. Minimum size of fish has been increased, species, controls on the species that you can land, and the number of days you have at sea. Hopefully this will reap benefits for the fishermen and for the general fish trade itself in the future. I'm sure it will. Fishing will return.
I miss going on the ships now, but what can I say is that it's not the same now. After all, you get the characters that you work with, a lot of them are now gone, and you miss those, and that's the sad part of it today. I've lost a lot of friends over this past 2 or 3 years, and that's what it is, sad. Yeah. But that's all. But in the yards, no, I'd go back tomorrow if they wanted me, but I'm a bit too old for that now.
People thought that they would never see the decline of industry on the Tyne in their lifetime. However, from full production to total decline, it has been witnessed by many at an alarming rate. The changing phase of the Tyne is obvious to see. We have seen a dramatic change on the Tyne. It was a source of not only work, but a way of life. Today the Tyne is cleaner, has a number of marinas and 3 art complexes on its banks, the Customs House at the mouth of the river, and the Baltic and Sage at Gateshead. Newcastle, once known for its coal and industry, is now a party city.
It makes me incredibly sad when I look over from the Customs House over at what used to be Smith's. The lack of cranes, it's weird. When I go around the place, it never fails to amaze me about the lack of any reference points to what used to go on. No cranes to see hardly at all. Whole communities have really suffered. One of the interesting things was a discussion we had about just how many shipyards there were on the Tyne and how many other industries ran alongside them. You had catering, you had supply of metal and all the rest of it going on. All these industries that depend on each other. And I can remember this long, well, down the full table of what was on the Tyne. There were so many of them that had to have separate sheets. There was so much going on. You look now and there's nothing. You've got maybe McNulty offshore, you've got 1 or 2 other things, and that's it. And you're going to have more and more like private boats and, inessential things like that. It's really sad state of affairs when you think about it.
Yes, I do. I do think there's a sense of community being lost. That is the biggest thing that's changed on the River Tyne. Everybody worked and lived on the River Tyne. The work's gone, so they've all got to go somewhere else to find a job.
This might apply to the trades like the shipyards and things of that sort. But with fishermen are hunters. It's natural for them to do this, and the skills that they have, they'll pass on to other people. I don't see that as a problem.
From then to now, you've got a pretty river. Nothing more. A pretty river.
I mean, you've still got shepherds offshore and that with there's cable ships and big cranes, and still developing the AP Tyne as the odd ship in there. The Ice Maiden's still going nowhere, she'll still lie and do nothing. Yeah. Shame about swans, I'm sure that could still be kept going, but it's all economics.
Shipbuilding dominated the Tyne. The yards and ancillary industries are no longer. What do we have to remind us of their power? Today's children know little of our heritage. They need to be told. There's little to nothing to commemorate their passing. All we seem to have is memories.
From the naval yard down to Smith's docks, working round the clock, half shifts and weekends, Neptune's chock-a-block. Same at Brigham's down to Clarence, building ships on the Tyne, building ships on the Tyne, building ships on the Tyne.
People come down to the quay, and they've always come down to the quay to see people working, to see things being done. That's changing somewhat, and it's now becoming more of a tourist venue where people come down, look at the river, have fish and chips, have a meal at the restaurant or whatever, and then perhaps to walk along the breakwater to Tynemouth, get a bit fresh air at the same time.
not so long ago, they had my grandsons walking along the river, and they were asking us various things, and as you know, it's all beautifully landscaped now and silent and quiet, but they were asking us if it had always been like this, and I says, no, there used to be shipyards here at one time. And they said, well, what are they like, you know, because they're only 5 and 6. And I started explaining to them, but then it come to me just how the demise of the shipyards has really affected the community, you know. And it's sad to see the situation now, not just in the sense of they're not there anymore, but how they've had a knock-on effect and the effect on people in the community, job-wise, employment, a lot, you know.
Oh, well, I think in a way, time's got to move on. There's more modern technology now, like it's computers, it's space age stuff, whatever, you know what I mean. I think there's better jobs now than what there was in the shipyards, in the mines, in the docks and whatever. Like, more healthier. Them days you took a trade, and I didn't know what shipyards were or what trades were in there, but I knew there was a lot of lads were working there, and I just went there. And once you were in there, I enjoyed being in there.
Oh yes, I loved it. Even now at this age, I always look back of all the jobs I've done, and I've done quite a lot. I loved it.
I still love the Tyne. I always will, you know. From when I used to scull the boat across from North to South Shields, in all weathers. I used to get wrong, but never stopped us.
It was a hard job in the olden days, and at the same time, I love swans. I'm still a swans lad. That's why I collect photographs of swans, I collect books of swan hunters. When the yard was finished, I was very sad, and tears in my eyes when the floating dock went away with the cranes on, and also especially seeing the Ark Royal. But Swans was a good place to work, and I class myself as a Swans lad. I worked all over the yards, different yards, and to me Swans was the best yard I worked in, and to me it was just fantastic. I can look back in my whole life and you got a lot of satisfaction. You are part of history because you worked there, and history is always worth remembering.
There was one guy getting quite emotional on the banks of the river, and he said to me, do you see that staircase going up to the bridge? You see that rail down there that they're holding on to? I made that. I did that for the Ark Royal. Huge sense of pride in that guy. Now, you know, long since he worked in the yard. Now imagine that repeated tens of thousands of times to families who used to get involved in the launch and hear those stories. As my brother built every ship that he ever worked on in Swans. Of course he was only part of a big team, but he built every ship that was ever worked on. And I think the sense of camaraderie that they lost when those big yards closed is something that we might never get back. The sense of humour, the stories that came out of it.
The camaraderie was amazing. We had such adventures. I don't know how I survived it, to be honest. I remember trying to lift a spanner in the winter off the ship's deck and my hand staying with it. It was frozen to the deck along with it, you know.
Oh, that was good crack. Some characters, like gaffers. I mean, one of the gaffers was called the haversack because he was never off your back.
Well, it's so sad, you know, when you look at the river in comparison to what it used to be. It was just a hive of activity. There would be numerous ships up and down the river, all the way up and all the way down.
So we had a guy called Bungalow because he had an out upstairs and he was nowhere bright.
One of the best things for me working in that environment was to see craftsmen really putting their heart and soul into what they were doing. I could not believe what they could achieve, making the most remarkable things.
When I was working in Crellins, we had a manager there. He was known as the Pill. The reason he was called the Pill was he was the birth control, the birth, B-E-R-T, it's birth, you know, but they built a ship on. He was the birth control manager, so he was the Pill.
Oh yeah, some great characters. One was a great lad, a fantastic footballer. What a character this man was. You'll laugh a minute with some of them. And they never let you down. It was just wonderful. Yeah.
Looking back, I mean, I might have done things differently if I'd have known what I know now, like, you know what I mean? But that's the way it goes, isn't it? Well, I was, had some good times working in the shipyards, like, definitely.
Well, you feel sad that everything's gone, but when you look at it and you take a trip, like I take, from the mouth of the Tyne, right up to Righton, as far as I can go, when my boat hits the bottom, Righton Willows, all that greenery, all the trees, all the new developments, the nice buildings. The river's beautiful still. It's still romantic, it's still lovely. In fact, I would recommend anybody to come down at night, on a calm night, running down the river with just all the lights reflecting on the water, just a ripple and a quiet. It's totally different, but it's still a beautiful river. It just is.
Industry on the Tyne and the men who worked there had an impact on the world. It is important to remember, not only for those men, but for future generations.
Works 6 days, 2 off shifts, pays the bills, loves his wife. He knows heaven's not on earth, believes in an afterlife. He's someone you just might know, share a few words as you go. Loves to see his children grow, no ordinary Joe. It is hard in the shipyard, looking tired and now it's late. Seems as if he's waiting for timeless hand of fate. And I've known him through the years, he never speaks of his fears. Work is music to his ears, no ordinary Joe. No ordinary Joe, no ordinary Joe. 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 Don't think there's nothing to see, he wants what we all want to be. No ordinary Joe is he, he's extraordinary. He's someone you just might know, share a few words as you go. Loves to see his children grow, no ordinary Joe. No ordinary Joe. No ordinary Joe. No ordinary Joe.